In the heart of Eurasia, an extraordinary infrastructure vision is taking shape, one that could fundamentally alter the economic and geopolitical landscape stretching from Central Asia all the way to Europe. Kazakhstan has unveiled plans for a monumental engineering undertaking, a massive artificial waterway designed to link the Caspian Sea directly to the Black Sea, with China and Russia as strategic partners in this audacious venture. Initial projections suggest this colossal project could demand investments surpassing 15 billion US dollars. If brought to fruition, this canal would stand as one of the most transformative infrastructure achievements across the entire Eurasian landmass. The implications are profound. This waterway wouldn't just move ships and cargo. It would fundamentally reconfigure trade pathways and shift the balance of geopolitical influence between two of the world's most economically dynamic continents. During multilateral discussions held in Central Asia this past April, the proposal received meaningful endorsement from both Chinese officials and representatives from Central Asian nations. Participating governments have started forging preliminary agreements on critical aspects including route selection, investment burden-sharing frameworks, and the phased rollout of technical and financial preparations. The momentum suggests this is no longer merely theoretical speculation. Concrete steps toward coordination are now underway. Should this initiative formally commence, the scale would be breathtaking. Construction would mobilize an estimated workforce numbering in the hundreds of thousands, alongside tens of thousands of heavy machinery units operating continuously across what could be a decade-long building phase. The sheer magnitude places it among the most ambitious civil engineering endeavors ever contemplated in modern history. Yet here's the puzzle that demands explanation. Despite more than a decade of discussion, diplomatic interest, and technical assessment, this grand vision has remained exactly that, a vision locked in the realm of concepts and proposals. So the question naturally arises, will this attempt finally transition from blueprint to reality? And perhaps more importantly, what strategic calculations are driving Kazakhstan, China, and Russia to pursue this three-nation super canal in the first place? If you appreciate the kind of in-depth analysis we provide here, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming investigations into the forces shaping our interconnected world. Now let's examine this fascinating story in detail. The geographic reality. Understanding the Caspian's strategic dilemma. To fully grasp why this canal matters, we need to start with geography. When you examine a map of Eurasia, the Caspian Sea immediately commands attention, not because of its size alone, though it is indeed the planet's largest enclosed body of water, but because of its position at the crossroads of continents and the extraordinary concentration of natural resources surrounding its shores. Many observers underestimate just how strategically vital the Caspian region truly is within the global geographic framework. The significance becomes clear when you consider the countries that share its coastline: Kazakhstan to the northeast, Turkmenistan to the east, Azerbaijan to the west, Iran to the south, and Russia to the north. 5 nations, each with distinct geopolitical interests, all converging around this massive inland sea. According to verified data from international energy assessments, the collective proven petroleum reserves held by these 5 Caspian nations exceed 300 billion barrels, representing roughly 1/5 of all known global oil deposits. Their natural gas holdings are equally impressive, surpassing 9.7 trillion cubic meters. These are staggering figures that underscore why global powers pay such close attention to this region. But here's the critical limitation that defines the Caspian's strategic challenge. Despite sitting atop such enormous energy wealth, every single one of these countries faces the same fundamental problem. They lack direct maritime access to the world's open oceans. They're landlocked in the most consequential sense. Their resources, their trade goods, their economic futures are all constrained by geography. This is where the Black Sea enters the picture. Positioned adjacent to the Caspian, the Black Sea serves as a vital connector linking Europe, Asia, the Mediterranean basin, and the Middle East, multiple regions of enormous economic significance. For the Caspian nations, the Black Sea represents their only realistic maritime gateway into the global shipping system, the crucial bridge between their landlocked position and the world's major commercial sea routes. However, reaching the Black Sea from the Caspian presents its own set of obstacles. Currently, only one navigable waterway exists connecting these two strategic bodies of water, the Volga-Don Canal, constructed during the Soviet era and sometimes referred to as the Lenin Canal. This aging infrastructure began its service life back in 1948, meaning it has now been operational for 77 years. An impressive longevity, certainly, but one that comes with significant limitations. The canal's entire length can accommodate only vessels with a maximum draft of 3.5 meters and cargo capacity below 5,000 tons. In an era of modern supertankers and massive bulk carriers that can transport hundreds of thousands of tons in a single voyage, these restrictions are extraordinarily limiting. The Volga-Don simply cannot handle the heavy oil tankers and large commercial vessels that contemporary global trade demands. The inadequacy of this infrastructure isn't merely theoretical. On August 14, 2017, a concrete example illustrated the problem vividly. An oil tanker called the Vines ran aground while attempting to navigate the Varvarovskoye Reservoir section along the Volga-Don Canal route. The incident forced a temporary complete closure of the waterway, disrupting shipments and demonstrating the fragility of relying on this single, outdated corridor. This reality has gradually crystallized a shared recognition among the Caspian nations. They urgently need a safer, more robust alternative route with substantially higher transport capacity. The current system simply cannot support their economic ambitions or meet the demands of 21st century commerce. It's against this backdrop of geographic constraint and infrastructure inadequacy that the proposed Eurasian Grand Canal, championed jointly by China, Russia, and Kazakhstan, has emerged as a potentially transformative solution. This project promises to reshape not just regional logistics, but the entire geopolitical equation governing interactions between Asia and Europe. So what exactly would this canal look like? The concept of connecting the Caspian and Black Seas through an artificial waterway isn't new. Actually, the fundamental idea stretches back decades, originating in 1953 when Soviet leader Joseph Stalin first proposed such a project. At that time, the plan aligned perfectly with the USSR's ambitious 5 Seas strategy, a comprehensive navigation initiative designed to integrate the Soviet Union's vast internal water networks. The Soviet government had already embarked on multiple large-scale hydraulic engineering projects, including the construction of the Volga-Don Canal itself. These efforts aimed to create an interconnected system of navigable waterways that would boost the nation's shipping capacity and facilitate internal commerce across the enormous Soviet territory. However, following Stalin's death in 1953, political priorities shifted. The canal expansion plan was shelved, deemed either too expensive, too complex, or simply less urgent than other pressing needs facing the post-Stalin leadership. Even so, the water system infrastructure developed during that era wasn't wasted. The reservoirs, locks, and canal segments constructed then have provided valuable technical insights and practical reference points for contemporary proposals to either modify existing routes or construct entirely new waterways across the region. The idea lay dormant for over half a century until 2007, when Kazakhstan's then-president Nursultan Nazarbayev revived the concept in a new form. Nazarbayev publicly expressed Kazakhstan's interest in constructing a navigable canal that would directly link the Caspian Sea with the Black Sea, bypassing the limitations of the aging Soviet-era infrastructure. For Kazakhstan, this wasn't merely an infrastructure proposal, it represented a strategic assertion of national autonomy. By developing an alternative transportation corridor, Kazakhstan could reduce its heavy dependence on Russian transit systems and establish greater control over how its valuable natural resources reached international markets. In a region where transportation routes often determine political leverage, this mattered enormously. 1 year later, in 2008, Nazarbayev raised the proposal again during the Eurasian Economic Union Summit held in Sochi, calling on member states to jointly explore the feasibility of such an undertaking. His persistence signaled that Kazakhstan viewed this project as a long-term strategic priority, not just a passing diplomatic gesture. According to research into the technical discussions that have taken place since then, 3 primary route options have been seriously considered, each with distinct advantages and significant challenges. The first and most obvious option involves upgrading and expanding the current Volga-Don canal infrastructure. On paper, this approach seems logical. You're working with existing waterways, familiar terrain, and established navigation patterns. However, the practical obstacles are formidable. The canal itself suffers from fundamental design limitations that cannot easily be overcome. The waterway corridors are too narrow for modern commercial traffic. The depth is insufficient for vessels with deeper drafts. And perhaps most problematically, the surrounding areas are now densely developed with cities, industrial facilities, and transportation networks built right up to the canal's edges over the past 7 decades. These constraints mean the existing canal can handle only small to medium-sized vessels, far below what modern large-scale commercial shipping demands. The transit capacity simply doesn't meet the basic requirements that would justify massive new investment. Transportation engineers and infrastructure specialists who have evaluated this option generally conclude it's not viable. Attempting to expand the Volga-Don Canal to contemporary standards would essentially require rebuilding it entirely while maintaining operations on the current route, a logistical nightmare that would likely cost more and take longer than constructing a new canal from scratch. Therefore, when serious discussions about the Eurasian Grand Canal take place, industry experts typically dismiss this first route as inadequate from the outset. This brings us to the second set of possibilities, which actually encompasses 2 distinct alternatives, a northern route and a southern route, both designed to bypass the Volga-Don entirely. The northern route concept generally envisions starting from the northern Caspian coastal region, connecting into the Volga River basin or its major tributaries, then moving northwest to link up with the Don River system before ultimately reaching either the Sea of Azov or directly into the Black Sea. The primary advantage here lies in the ability to leverage existing river networks and utilize some foundational infrastructure already in place. Rivers are already there. Certain navigational systems are already established. This could potentially reduce both construction costs and implementation timeframes, but the challenges are equally substantial. The terrain across this northern path varies dramatically, with significant elevation changes that would require extensive lock systems. The river channels themselves wind considerably, adding distance and navigation complexity. Water depths are often shallow, particularly during seasonal variations, and the flow rates fluctuate dramatically between spring floods and summer low-water periods. Perhaps most limiting, the entire northern region experiences harsh winters with widespread freezing conditions. Ice formation would severely restrict or completely halt navigation for months each year, dramatically shortening the effective operating season and driving up maintenance costs. These seasonal limitations would undermine the canal's fundamental purpose, providing reliable year-round access to global shipping routes. The southern route presents a different set of trade-offs. This alternative would begin from the southern or southwestern shores of the Caspian Sea, extend westward through the Caucasus region, and reach the Black Sea by traversing either Georgian or Azerbaijani territory. Geographically, this route offers the shortest distance between the 2 seas, a significant advantage in terms of construction scale and operational efficiency. In theory, ships could transit more quickly, and the total infrastructure footprint could be smaller than the sprawling northern alternative. However, the southern path must cross mountainous terrain throughout the Caucasus Range. This geological reality would necessitate constructing an enormous number of tunnels, bridges, and multi-stage lock systems to manage elevation changes. The engineering scale would be absolutely massive, potentially rivaling or even exceeding the complexity of the Panama Canal's mountain crossing segments. Moreover, the Caucasus region sits in a geologically active zone characterized by significant seismic risk. Earthquakes and landslides occur with concerning frequency. Building and maintaining a major waterway through such unstable terrain would require constant monitoring, reinforcement, and periodic reconstruction after geological events, adding both cost and operational risk. There's also the political dimension to consider. The southern route would cross multiple international borders, requiring complex diplomatic coordination among nations that don't always see eye to eye on regional issues. Security guarantees, territorial agreements, revenue-sharing arrangements, and operational authority would all need to be negotiated and maintained across different political systems and national interests. Given these compounding difficulties, stakeholders generally agree that both the northern and southern routes present implementation challenges that may prove insurmountable, at least under current technological and political conditions. Among all the canal proposals that have been seriously studied, one stands out as having the most realistic prospect for actual implementation. The third option, which Kazakhstan has designated as the new Kuma-Manik Depression Line. This plan centers on constructing an entirely new canal through the Kuma-Manik Depression, a geological formation located north of the Caucasus Mountains in southern Russia. This lowland area is particularly significant because it already contains several large reservoir systems and possesses basic infrastructure that could support water system connectivity. The greatest single advantage of this proposed route is its directness. Unlike the winding river systems of the northern alternative, the Kuma-Manik path is nearly straight, with a total length of approximately 700 kilometers. To put that in perspective, it would be more than 300 kilometers shorter than the current Volga-Don canal route, a substantial reduction in both construction scale and future operational distance. According to engineering specifications that have been developed for this concept, the new canal could be designed to accommodate cargo vessels of up to 10,000 tons displacement, more than double the capacity of the existing Volga-Don system. Estimated annual transport capacity has been projected at 75 million tons, representing a quantum leap beyond what the current infrastructure can handle. These specifications would make the canal genuinely useful for modern commercial shipping, capable of handling the bulk carriers, tankers, and container ships that dominate contemporary maritime trade. However, even this most practical route faces daunting obstacles, primarily centered on financing and political coordination. Completing a canal that physically spans 3 countries and affects the strategic interests of many more is extraordinarily complex. Current estimates place the total investment requirement at over $15 billion, a staggering sum that raises immediate questions about funding sources and burden sharing. While some portion of this investment is theoretically planned to be realized through resource exchange agreements, essentially trading access, transit rights, or energy supplies for infrastructure investment, the core financial question remains unanswered. Who will actually commit the capital required to make this happen? Kazakhstan, as the primary proponent and one of the future main beneficiaries, seems like an obvious contributor. However, expecting Kazakhstan to shoulder such an enormous financial burden alone is clearly unrealistic, especially given that critical implementation details remain undefined and the overall project timeline remains uncertain. For a country with a GDP of approximately $220 billion, committing $15 billion to a single infrastructure project would represent an extraordinary national undertaking. Russia, which would be another major beneficiary and through whose territory the most viable route would pass, faces its own constraints. Currently subjected to comprehensive Western sanctions that have significantly impacted its economy, Russia is dealing with fiscal pressures across multiple fronts. Its government is simultaneously funding military operations, managing economic stabilization programs, and dealing with reduced energy revenues due to price caps and market restrictions. Under these circumstances, Russia appears both unwilling and genuinely unable to commit large-scale funding to a long-term infrastructure project whose benefits wouldn't materialize for at least a decade. Russian officials have expressed interest in the concept, but concrete financial commitments have not been forthcoming. This brings us to China, the third major player in this proposed partnership. China's position is particularly interesting because while it would certainly benefit from improved Eurasian transportation infrastructure, its current external connectivity strategy remains focused elsewhere. China continues to prioritize enhancing and expanding existing transportation corridors, particularly the China-Europe Railway Express system, which has grown exponentially over the past decade. Additionally, China is investing in railway connections through Iran and Pakistan, creating overland alternatives to maritime routes that are vulnerable to potential blockades or political disruption. With these railway networks gradually expanding and their transport capacity continuing to grow year after year, China faces no immediate urgency to open an entirely new high-investment corridor through the Caspian Black Sea region. The existing alternatives, while imperfect, are functional and improving. Moreover, any new canal project would require an exceptionally long implementation timeline. Construction would likely take at least 10 to 15 years from groundbreaking to operational status. Throughout that extended period, construction costs could escalate, environmental risks could materialize, political situations could shift, and diplomatic frictions could emerge, all creating uncertainty about whether the eventual benefits would justify the sustained investment. There's another factor that complicates the political equation: Turkey. Any new waterway connecting the Caspian to the Black Sea would inevitably affect Turkey's strategic position as the gatekeeper controlling access from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean through the Turkish Straits, the Bosporus, and Dardanelles. Currently, Turkey derives significant geopolitical leverage from this geographic position. A new canal increasing Black Sea traffic could either enhance Turkey's importance as a transit hub or potentially undermine its control over regional shipping patterns, depending on how the broader logistics ecosystem evolves. Turkish officials would undoubtedly view such a project with a mixture of interest and concern. Whether this would lead to diplomatic maneuvering, political opposition, or even outright conflict remains uncertain, but it would certainly become a new pressure point in an already complex regional geopolitical landscape. Given these overlapping financial constraints, political sensitivities, and strategic uncertainties, the Eurasian Grand Canal project clearly requires extensive further consultation, rigorous evaluation, and careful balancing of interests before it can realistically advance beyond the conceptual stage. Yet despite all these formidable challenges, none of the key countries involved appear ready to abandon the Eurasian Grand Canal concept entirely. The reason is straightforward. Each nation has compelling strategic needs that this waterway could address. For Kazakhstan, the motivations are perhaps most transparent. The country possesses abundant natural wealth, significant oil and natural gas reserves, extensive grain production capabilities, and valuable mineral deposits including uranium, copper, and rare earth elements. However, Kazakhstan has long struggled with a fundamental geographic disadvantage: the absence of convenient, efficient, and stable maritime export routes for these resources. Currently, Kazakhstani exports must either transit through Russian territory and infrastructure, creating dependency that Kazakhstan's leadership would prefer to reduce, or take circuitous overland routes that add substantial cost and time. Once the Eurasian Canal becomes operational, it would create a direct connection between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. establishing a shorter and deeper shipping route capable of handling 10,000-ton vessels, navigating directly from Kazakhstani ports to European and global markets. This would dramatically reduce travel distances and eliminate multiple transshipment procedures that currently inflate costs and create inefficiencies. The economic impact would be substantial. Kazakhstan's exported oil, natural gas, grain, and minerals would gain significantly greater price competitiveness in European and global commodity markets. Beyond the immediate transport cost advantages, Kazakhstan envisions transforming itself into a major logistics hub positioned strategically between Central Asia, the Caspian region, and the Black Sea corridor. Ports, railway connections, logistics centers, warehousing facilities, financial services, and supporting industries would naturally develop along the canal route, creating the foundation for Kazakhstan's long-term economic diversification strategy.